We're going to talk about dynamics today. Dynamics are really important because without them music sounds a bit dead. They're not called dynamic for nothing. It's dynamism that you put into the music with your different shades of colour, your louds, your softs. So it's not rocket science how you play a loud note. Just put more air through. You can imagine a loud note perhaps using this visual aid. So the air is really a big tube of air that you have to put through your flute. And you can't last very long when you do that. But now going to soft notes, the technique for that does take a bit more thinking about. You still need to blow lots of air through because otherwise you get the famous sagging. But the air has to go fast, but perhaps smaller. So if you could imagine this is your airstream now for your soft notes, which you could think of as small notes, small but fast. The difference between the two is that for the soft notes I'm closing up my lips to a really, really tiny hole, but I'm still supporting with my abdomen, as I now call it, no longer called the diaphragm. The abdomen is firm and it's pushing so that the air comes out quite fast, but we close up the hole between our lips so that the air can come out just a small stream of it. That makes it quieter. So there you have the technique. The most important thing with dynamics is that, I'm sure you all know, it goes sharp if you just blow harder. The flute just does. And vice versa, if you blow less hard, it goes flat. So we have to compensate for that. So as I got softer, I was blowing up and up and up more to keep it at pitch. And vice versa, as you get louder, you have to make the airstream go down and down and down more. So that really feels like a sort of lengthening of your whole lower jaw, and the airstream's really kind of coming down at quite a steep pitch. And just to repeat that, while you're going up and up and up, you need a little bit more diaphragm support, or rather abdomen support, as you go up. So the softer you're playing, the more work it is, actually. If your piece doesn't have any dynamics in it, the composer might have forgotten about them, just didn't think of writing them in, or he deliberately wanted you to replace some of the dynamics. So make some up, make it interesting that way. Sometimes they're written as the loudest dynamic might be MF, and the quietest one might be P, so it's quite often a good idea to exaggerate them. So if MF is the loudest, you might want to go right up to F, or FF even, just to give more contrast. And the same with piano, you might want to bring it down to pianissimo. The other thing that's worth mentioning about dynamics, the way they're written, is a dynamic usually is meant to last until the next one. So you usually have a whole section or a phrase that's in one dynamic. So especially in Baroque music and classical music, you have large sections that are one dynamic. But again, as I said before, you can add more dynamics to these sections, keeping within the kind of rules for the period. So in Baroque music, we would do what we call terraced dynamics. So you might have a whole phrase of forte, and then perhaps the phrase is repeated, and you might do it piano, for example. You don't tend to have crescendos and diminuendos too much. In classical music you might have a bit more crescendo and diminuendo, and in romantic music you'll have loads of dynamics going up and down as much as possible. That really makes it sound romantic. It's helpful to think of the word piano as meaning soft rather than quiet. So think of the quality of softness, which for the flute is quite helpful because the flute is quite a quiet instrument anyway. So we might be playing, when it says piano, which could be interpreted as mezzo piano or possibly even mezzo forte for some people. But actually I thought of that as an expressive piano. So it's all about context, where you're playing, what kind of size room you're in, what other instruments there are. If you're in an orchestra, you hardly ever need to play quietly because you just won't be heard in any case, let alone if you play quietly. Doing this kind of controlled dynamic playing uses very fine muscle movement here and strength. So it's worth really practicing it, because without the practice your muscles won't be able to do it actually. And I recommend practicing your scales. If you're practicing scales, just do them in different dynamics. Practice pieces in different dynamics. It's actually a good exercise in any case for interpretation to try different dynamics in your pieces. See what effects a different dynamic has on a section or on a whole piece. Like a whole movement of a Handel sonata, for example. You could play it all piano, and then after a while the colours will start to present themselves to you, and you will think this section could do with being really soft, this section could do with being really loud. In your written music, if it says forte/piano, that usually refers to a repeated section, and it means play it loud the first time and soft the second time.